Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. For this video, I'll be reviewing the DM's Guild mini-adventure, the Corwyn Catacombs, designed by Jake Bhattacharyya, aka Magnificent Creations, for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your DM's Guild shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/RogueWatson. Shouts to my platinum patrons, Andrew, Richard, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Nick, Andy, Grayson, and Chris, and gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy, Nima, Marcos, Dade, Vicente, Gilberto, Sean, AK, Cert2B, Adam, The Desert Lounge, Sam, Arash, and Lumpy Spuds. Thank you all very much for your support. The Corwyn Catacombs is I guess it's not described as a one-shot, although it pretty much is very small, so I use the term mini-adventure, designed for 4th level parties. It is on the DM's Guild, but I believe it was actually originally sent to me via Drive-Thru RPG, so it doesn't use anything specifically from the Forgotten Realms universe, which is the big stipulation about whether you want something on the DM's Guild or not, because you get to basically play with those toys. But you could slot it into whatever, universe or campaign or whatever you're using, which is a big advantage to a lot of these mini adventures. They basically act as kind of, their own self-contained side quests, which is what we get here. It's pretty solid. My complaints are more about that I thought it was going to be more interesting than it was, because the description hints at this, you're delving into the ruins of this ancient, precursor civilization, and there's this really fascinating alien creature on the cover, 5 eyes, and that weird ass noseless nose, Voldemort nose going on. And that all seems really cool, but it really amounts to delving into a very tiny dungeon, dealing with a goblin tribe, and then fighting some constructs and an optional boss battle against one of these. They're called Chirans, I guess, Chiran. And there's not even really, you don't really learn anything about them. It's just kind of a regular boss fight with a magic user. The description of delving into the ruins of this ancient civilization made me feel like, okay, this is going to get some really interesting stuff. We're going to learn a lot about this. And none of that really happened. It was just very much a straightforward, kind of simple dungeon crawl. Now, that in of itself isn't necessarily bad. And I think it does balance those 3 pillars of D&D role-playing very well, which is the social role-playing, exploration, and combat. I feel like it does, even as tiny as it is, balance all those things very well. So let's go into it pretty quick. It's a very short, it's only 18 pages total. The actual dungeon itself is only a couple pages. We do get separate player handouts, but only of the written text documents, which are really fun. There's one for a wanted poster, and then one that you find in the goblin camp written by the goblin point of view, which is really fun. But we don't get a separate map for the dungeon, which is a huge misstep. If your entire product that you're selling revolves around a dungeon crawl, and let's face it, most D&D adventures are going to involve dungeons. It is one of the Ds. We really need some kind of map. And the quality of your map is what I'm always going to judge you on. And if it is basically just a dungeon, then more so the ratio of you needing that map is going to be more critical. And this one, it has a map, but it's a very simple grid map, and it is not. We don't have a separate player handout that you can just use, so that is a big bummer. The initial inciting incident is pretty basic. You go, you have to rescue a kid that was picking mushrooms near the dungeon. Parents, please don't let your kids do anything near dungeons. I guess the worlds are just lousy with dungeons, so there's just dungeons everywhere. They're potholes or something. But at least try and keep your kids away, because it's just bad news. And in this case, it's obviously bad news. The one interesting thing is it kind of takes a bit from, this is probably happens in other campaigns as well, but something that Tomb of Annihilation is a really neat idea in the titular tomb, the Tomb of the 9 Gods, is that there was a previous adventuring party that the players can run into and find how they all died horrible deaths. Just kind of a neat little side thing that helps make that dungeon come to life. And the designer does that concept here, which is you can find the remains of an adventuring party. But because the dungeon is so tiny, you basically just see one, and then that can be kind of spooky. And then you just see all the others literally at the feet of the things that killed them. So it's not even quite used as effectively as I was hoping. And that's the only way. Really, what it does is it serves as a way to give the players treasure, because otherwise there's not a whole lot of treasure in that dungeon. I do like that this initial town is fleshed out. As I mentioned, it doesn't use, at least I don't believe, Corwyn is an actual town in the Forgotten Realms, for example. I think this is all its own, maybe original campaign setting. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not familiar with the campaign world that this takes place in. And I like the fact that we're actually given some notes and some role-playing bits on all the NPCs, even though the party really doesn't have to mess with them. It's kind of an Adventurers League that way. Like, you get your inciting incident, and then you go, or Adventures, I mean, every JRPG is done like this too, like a Dragon Quest or something. Not that I'm bad-mouthing Dragon Quest. Those games are awesome. Dragon Quest XI is a great game. But it follows that very same cycle of go to town, talk to some NPCs, gear up, get the quest to go to the dungeon, usually kill the boss, and then you're done with that area. That's basically what this is. Although in this case, you don't have to kill the boss at all. You just have to rescue this woman's son who's gone missing in there. Now, the town knows that there are some goblins nearby that have camped out and taken up residence in the dungeon, which I think is a really neat idea. I don't like the thought of dungeons just sitting around waiting for adventurers to come loot them. I like to think of them as living places like towns, ones that would have maybe their own ecosystem or something, if it's anything other than like undead. And in this case, I like that generally the front half of the dungeon has been excavated out and is inhabited by a tribe of goblins, which is pretty cool. And the players can choose how to deal with them, anywhere from combat to maybe they could try to sneak by. It doesn't seem like that's entirely easy, or deal with them diplomatically, which I think is cool. So that's where a lot of the social role playing comes in, as well as this beginning part with the actual town. But I do appreciate the town is pretty fleshed out. We get notes on like the blacksmith and the general store, and it's totally not necessary, but it's really nice to see. In case you, for some reason, wanted to use the town, I would imagine most people wanting to actually pick this up and use it would just place this in whatever town the players are currently at in their campaign, and then have some, random NPC says, hey, my son got lost in this nearby dungeon. So you'd use the dungeon and probably not the town. But that's why I appreciate that the designer went kind of above and beyond and really fleshed out the town, just in case you wanted to use it or had some ideas. So that's always nice to see. And then it's just the dungeon after that, which encompasses all of, 5 or 6 pages. So we're going to skip ahead to the map. So you can see, here's the map that we're given, which is a map. It's not detailed at all. It's literally just a grid map. It's not something I could actually, it helps in terms of visualizing the size of rooms and the relation of rooms to each other, which is what maps do. That's like the bare minimum, but this is not something I would actually want to play on. And there's no separate player map, even if I wanted to. There's no version of this without the numbers and letters and secret doors and things. So that's a big kind of epic fail on that end, which is a bummer. The front half, as you can see, the numbers number 1, 2, 3, and 4 is where the goblins hang out. That's the goblin tribe. And then to get beyond them is the actual, ruins of the ancient civilization, although it really just comes across as a bunch of black speckled walls and some plinths where you're supposed to put these orbs on, and the orbs are what open doors. So there's a little bit of that kind of interesting alien technology there, but there's not nearly enough of that, and I don't feel like there's enough going on to warrant having this crazy alien creature tomb in here that would normally not even exist, which is pretty nuts. There's even a little puzzle door riddle. I was like, how do the aliens even work with having a puzzle door thing on him? I mean, it's a neat idea. I like puzzles. I like riddles. And I like that this is an optional one that can lead to treasure. It's not like a gated thing. And that the designer mentions the fact that you can just make basically investigation checks to have the player solve it. I like all that. But thematically wise, why is this, does this alien progenitor race lock their doors with riddles? Maybe they do. I don't know. The goblins, I do appreciate. As I mentioned, I appreciate there's goblins here in general, because I do think, dungeons would be lived in, and you could even have, creatures on top of creatures, and some moved in where others don't like them and all that kind of thing. So I like that kind of living aspect of it all. And the goblins know they can't go deeper into the dungeon because there's bad shit back there. There's like metal dudes, and it's bad news, and they've kind of boarded up that back end, and they're causing a nuisance for the town. So when the players get the quest to actually go rescue the sun, they can also see another side quest to go take out the goblins. But when they're there, the players could choose to deal with the goblins diplomatically, which I do appreciate. It's going to start off in combat, and there's only 6 goblins and a bugbear chieftain, which is for level 4 not very challenging. Goblins pretty much suck. So there might be tempted for the players to just defeat them. There's a bit of a dark twist here where in the goblin sleeping area, they'll find a goblin child. So maybe it'll turn into like a Mandalorian situation where they want to kind of adopt this baby. Or maybe they'll murder the baby. I don't know how messed up your players are. But there is a little goblin baby there that might change your players' tunes in terms of how they deal with the goblins. The only thing of note is that the chieftain has or the bugbear, I guess, chieftain has an orb necklace that they found deeper into the dungeon, and that is one of the keys to unlocking the final boss, which again is completely optional. The players do not have to fight the boss at all. They don't have to jack with it. The whole goal is to deal with the goblins first of all, which you can deal with them either just negotiating some kind of peace if your players want to do more of a role-playing thing, or just straight up fighting and killing them all if they're just into the combat aspect. So that's one of the quests. The other quest is to find the kid, which the kid ran in deeper down. He's got the other orb. It requires 2 orbs to open the boss door. That's where the players find the bodies of the other adventurers, which serve as kind of a neat little tease, except you find one here like in the hallway, and then the other one is basically just at the feet of these big black automatons that seem like they're kind of a cross between like animated armor and a wraith, maybe. They've got this kind of touch of death ability. They're not like super powerful, although tier 1 gets really interesting when you have damage resistance. That can either be really hard or really trivial depending on your magic item situation with your players. If nobody and their magic level in general. So if you've got a more of a melee focused party and they don't have magic items, these things can be very, very difficult, taking half damage from all attacks. So that is kind of interesting. Otherwise, that's the only really threat here. They fight, though, which it could be the only battle. If they dealt with the goblins diplomatically, they fight those Chiron protectors, and then they find the sun deep in Area 9 here in the back. And then from there, they can just waltz out of the dungeon. It's a little anticlimactic and maybe unsatisfying, so hopefully most people would place the orbs on the pillars outside of room 10 and then walk in and fight this kind of cool boss wizard. Basically, this comes across as, I think, like a CR6 mage. Let's see, where's the stat block? This preserved Chiron. It's all written. The description is very cool. We get these cutout boxes that have very nice description text on there. I love that every room is actually organized with bullet points, which is very easy to read from the DM standpoint. I also like the layout that's used here. It's not the layout from the one that everybody uses, the standard version that looks like it's from the Wizards font and the Wizards color scheme and all that from their official text. It's given its own kind of green color scheme, and I think it works really well. And there's enough art here to satisfy me because it's not a very big, adventure. But I like the way it's laid out. It is well written. I just felt like the whole dungeon design itself was just a little disappointing for what I expected, which was this cool excavation and delve into this ancient civilization that nobody knew about and has these really powerful and the boss battle. It's just that single guy, and I've said time and again, you can't put your bosses by themselves unless they are ridiculously stronger and have like legendary actions and everything else. You got to have some kind of minions because the action economy is going to kill you being the DM every single time, and especially with a magic user who typically doesn't have a whole lot of defenses in terms of armor class and hit points. This one's going to have 15 armor class and 60 hit points. Might stick around for 2 rounds because again, you've got 4 or 5 players just wailing on him. Hopefully, he can get off a cloud kill or tentacles or something. I would change that a bit to where during the nice little again, it's very cool description text where he's like floating and then floats to the ground, and the players have awakened him. Is he instantly summons up some skeleton allies in the very beginning during the kind of, initial before we roll initiative thing, and then we start in combat. So you got to put some minions in there for your bosses. Otherwise, they are going down so quick. The one unique treasure you get here is an Arcus stone, which seems to work like an Ion stone, which are those magic items that can float around you and have various kind of buffs or abilities. It's not super exciting. I like the concept that there seemed to be like a set item. So the more Arca stones you have, the better they unlock additional things. But that would require you to, I assume, purchase more of this designer's products in order to see more of those Arca stones. So it's kind of a disappointment if this is the only one your players ever get, for example. And the only ability you see is that you do not need to eat or drink. Well, raise your hand if you're campaign if you don't worry about like rations or something. That's me right here. So something like that doesn't really excite me at all, and frankly isn't worth this big optional boss battle that the players can face. So I like the idea of changing the Arca stones and making them kind of a set item, but when you only have one of those items in your product and the first set thing isn't that exciting, it makes it a little bit disappointing. So that's a bit of a bummer. So mixed feelings in general. I think at the end, I like a lot of what I see here, but in terms of what I thought it was going to be, and what this promise of this alien civilization, all these, or this precursor civilization, ancient empire, and all these things, just ended up being really simple and just could have been a tomb for some mage or something. I didn't really get the flavoring that this was some really, really cool thing that the players were delving into. But the actual production quality is very, very good throughout this adventure. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for the Corwyn Catacombs. Pro, I do think the adventure balances social role-playing, exploration, and combat pretty well. The three main pillars of D&D, and kind of the three main things I'm looking for any adventure to cover. Social role-playing, obviously with the initial part in the town, but also there's some good stuff with the goblins and with the sun at the end. That can all be some role-playing notes. Exploration, anytime you've got a dungeon, you've pretty much already got exploration checked off. But exploration to me also means, like, are there things the players have to discover? Are there hidden rooms? Are you dealing with traps? This one, bare minimum of that. There's that one interesting puzzle door you've got, and then there's the whole thing with the orbs having to to open the final door. So there's a little bit of that, and then obviously combat with possibly with the goblins, with those constructs, and then with the final boss. Pros, a decently fleshed out town of Corwyn. I do appreciate that we get a full town here, even though I can't imagine most people would actually use the town. Not to speak ill of the design or anything, because it's a pro. I like having it here, but I would imagine most people wanting to use this as a side quest would pretty much just drop the dungeon in there, not necessarily use the town. But it's a neat idea, and I'm always looking out for cool and interesting NPCs, so that's always nice to see. And pro, the immersive player handouts, which I kind of skipped over, didn't I? This one, you get a little wanted poster, which is always nice to see. It's an actual, and we do get this as a separate, actual player handout document. And then this part, which is a note you can find from the goblins, really funny, written from the perspective of the goblins. I wish there was more of that because it's really delightful and fun. I like that a lot. Cons, the dungeon design is just a little bit too straightforward and overly simplistic for my taste, especially compared to what I thought we were going to get with the description. It's just a little bit too linear and simple. And the other con is we get no separate player map. I probably would have, let's just say, even if we had this as a separate player map, I probably would have at least had a bit of a complaint with the design in terms of there's no detail there, but I don't know. It depends, but at the very least, I need this as a separate player map, and then I could, throw this onto a VTT and then make little details and adjustments as I see fit, and at least use the framework. But as it is, I don't even have that to work with. Final verdict, the Corwyn Catacombs is a simple but solid self-contained mini-adventure that's easily slotted as a side quest into any low-level campaign. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson, and you can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.